uncomfortable relationship conversations. So in other words, what I want to discuss today is conversations that should happen, but they do not happen in relationships because people feel uncomfortable and they don't want to talk about them, right? So I want to talk about uncomfortable relationship conversations. And the reason why this is important is, first of all, growing up, my grandmother always used to tell us to beat the iron while it's hot. And for a while, I didn't really realize what that meant. So let me repeat that. Beat the iron while it's hot, right? And for a while, I didn't realize what that phrase meant. I just thought maybe that's just something that older folks would say, beat the iron while it's hot. And after a while, I got to realize, as I got older, I got to realize what she was saying. It's basically to deal with things when they are happening, right? Because if think about it, if an iron is really, really hot, that's the point when it's easiest to bend it, to shape it into the situation that you would want it to be. But the more cool it becomes, right? When the heat starts to wear off, then and the colder the iron gets, then the less of an opportunity that you have to shape that iron into something that you want it to be. So a lot of times what we do in relationships is we don't talk about things that need to be discussed. A lot of times just because we're already perhaps anticipating what the person's going to say and we don't want to hear perhaps what they're going to say. So we're making assumptions, right? And a lot of times, because obviously assumptions could be wrong, and then again, it depends on how well you know the person. Or we just don't want to be in that, we just don't want to have that uncomfortable conversation. So what we do is we decide to not talk about certain things because they would make us uncomfortable, and then we're thinking they'll make the person uncomfortable. The other reason why we don't talk about we don't have those uncomfortable conversations in relationships is because we don't want to scare, quote unquote, we don't want to scare the person off. So we feel like if we tell them, or if we have those conversations with them, that we're going to run them off or whatever the case is. But the truth is, the longer that we go without having those conversations is a lot of times the worse it becomes, right? Because we're seeing things that we don't like, or we're seeing things that, and it could be just small, minute things, not really huge problems, but could become huge problems because we don't take the time, we don't invest the time, or we're scared to take the time to actually talk about those things. So that's my encouragement to you is if there's a conversation that you need to have with your significant other, your husband, wife, partner, whatever the case is, if there's a conversation that you need to have, do not be so scared to have that conversation. Actually have it, because a lot of times what happens is, the number one reason for divorce, as they say, is money. And I believe the number two thing is communication. And a lot of times because people are not talking to each other. And a lot of times, even about the money situations, people are not discussing things with each other. But communication is key. And then what happens a lot of times is once you start talking about maybe just that small, minute thing, what happens is you're able to grow with the person, and then you're able to feel comfortable to have another conversation with them because you just had that conversation. But if we decide that we're too uncomfortable, or we don't want to make the person uncomfortable, or whatever the case is, and we don't want to have those conversations, then what happens is there's no growth. There's no growth in the relationship as far as communication is concerned. And the problem is still there. So we do not have the uncomfortable conversation about whatever the topic is, and because we don't want to have it, it doesn't mean that the problem goes away. It doesn't mean that the stuff that you might not like goes away, or they might not like it. It doesn't go away because you don't talk about it. And as a matter of fact, what could happen is resentment a lot of times could build up because people are not discussing simple things. Or it's like going to the doctor. It's like having a cut or something like that and not treating it for a while. And then weeks go by, and then we finally go to the doctor, and the doctor says, well, why didn't you come in all the time? Like, why didn't you, try to do something with this all the time? And I mean, before now, right? Well, why didn't you try to do something with it, with that cut or whatever it is? Because it's a whole lot worse now, right? Because it's had time to grow, to manifest, or whatever the case is in terms of a conversation, or in terms of a conversation that needed to be had. And it's now sometimes blown out of proportion. It's now gotten to the level where it's escalated and become a big thing when it was once just something that was really, really, really small. So communication breeds growth in relationships. Conversations breed growth into relationships. When we have conversations, when we have that type of dialogue, we're able to really sense where each person is in that relationship, to be able to discuss things that need to be discussed, and a lot of times be able to talk about things that, that were kind of, just kind of pushed below the rug, so to speak, and we can now talk about them, because it leads to growth. Remember, if you do not have the conversation, it doesn't mean the problem goes away. A lot of times, all that means is that that problem, month by month, year by year, is getting bigger, and then it gets to the point where you can't deal with it. So, that is my advice to you. If you are in a relationship and you are uncomfortable about whatever it is, it could be finances, it could be just minute, pet peeves or whatever the case is. It could be anything that could really impact the relationship, right? You need to have that conversation if you feel like you have to have that conversation with that person. Because a lot of times we overthink things and we're assuming or making assumptions that, this person might react a certain way. And they're probably not even thinking that. So, just have the conversations. And good conversations can lead, not always, but it can lead to growth in relationships. So that's what I just wanted to go over with you all today. All right, so thank you again for tuning in. Please don't forget to subscribe and hit the post notification button, hit the like button as well. Please leave your comments because I would love to hear from you, and I look forward to seeing you next time. And please remember, don't you ever forget that you always, no matter what the situation is, you always have a choice. See you next time.